Hello, everyone, and welcome to More Than Pride, More Than Merch, a very special collaboration between the James Beard Foundation and the Queer Food Foundation. My name is Morgan Carter, and I'm the content manager at the James Beard Foundation. I'm so happy to be welcoming you all this evening. Since March of 2020, the James Beard Foundation has been hosting industry support webinars and virtual events like this one to help navigate the challenges of COVID-19, provide resources for the hospitality industry, and to better stay connected throughout difficult times. Before we get going, here's some quick housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded. We will post a link to the recording on openforgood.com and on our YouTube after the program wraps. If you have any questions for the panelists, please write them in the Q&A and we'll try to address a few questions as time allows. If you're having any technical difficulties, just message us using the Q&A and we'll do what we can to troubleshoot. The JVF team will be keeping an eye out and we'll be happy to assist. Tonight's moderator is Vanessa Parish. She is a pastry chef from North Carolina who currently resides in Los Angeles. She owns an online business, Brown Sugar's Cookies, and has a dessert pop-up restaurant, Torch, which will continue to travel across major cities in 2022. She was host of the show, Tasting Our Roots, on BuzzFeed's Tasty channel, is a board member of the Queer Food Foundation, and has started two nonprofits, Brown Books for Brown Kids and Tasty Tutelage. Also joining us tonight is Eric C., founder and chef of the Awkward Scone and Ursula in Brooklyn. During the pandemic, Eric has been using his kitchen as a hub for relief work to serve meals and grocery kits to the Ali Forney Center and the Street Vendor Project. Passionate about combating food insecurity, he has also worked with Immigration Equality, the Center, Services and Advocacy for LGBT Elders, the Okra Project, and many others. We also have Zanette Begum. After studying economics at the New School, she went on to become the founder of Playground in Brooklyn, New York. Playground has expanded to become many things: a coffee shop, community space, greenhouse, independent online radio platform, and bookstore that prioritizes work from Black, Indigenous, Brown, Latinx, AAPI, and queer and trans authors. We also have Jasmine Seth. Jasmine is an HR executive turned chef with over a decade of experience across advertising and management consulting industries. She is also a James Beard Foundation grant recipient and creator of Tasting India, a weekly culinary adventure where she creates a flavor-rich thali, where she highlights a different Indian regional cuisine each week. And lastly, we have Parisa Parnian. Parisa is an Iranian-American multidisciplinary visual artist, designer, storyteller, and cook. As a cultural and culinary uplifter, Parisa combines her extensive experience in lifestyle design, event curation, food, and storytelling to delight the senses and warm the spirit. In 2016, Parisa left her 20-year career in the fashion industry to found both Savage MUSE, a radically inclusive design studio, and Savage Taste, a multifaceted food, culture, and community building hub. She recently launched her own spice blend called Persican, which is a celebration of cultural fluidity and the marriage of Persian and Mexican flavors. I would love to hand the microphone off to Gabrielle of the Queer Food Foundation.
Thanks, Morgan. Hi, everybody. My name is Gabrielle Lenar. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm one of the co-producers of the Queer Food Foundation. The Queer Food Foundation is a collective of chefs and food workers who are dedicated to creating, funding, promoting, and protecting queer spaces and acting as a resource for queer folks in food. Without any further ado, I'll hand it over to one of our founding board members, one of my dear friends, and the moderator for tonight, Vanessa Parish.
I like that last name part. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your time after this evening. I'm Vanessa Parish. We have got a really awesome panel for you guys. Thank you to all four of our amazing panelists. We are going to get into what we call More Than Pride merch. And the reason why we're talking about this is because Pride Month obviously gets super overwhelming and exhausting by the end of June. And there tends to be a theme within the community of June. There's a lot of Pride stuff. There's a lot of business. There's a lot of opportunities. And then we disappear for the rest of the year. So we're gonna have a conversation about how that makes us feel, what our plans are to kind of continue our pride, and how we as intersectional people, how we still thrive. So I want to kind of go around and let everyone introduce themselves. So we'll start with Eric. Go for it.
Hi, my name is Eric C. I have a small restaurant, a New Mexican inspired restaurant in Brooklyn called Ursula.
Okay, and then on my screen, I see Parisa.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Parisa. I'm located in LA, and right now I'm doing a lot of interesting things where it's an intersection of art, food, storytelling, and community building. It could span everything from, I have an art mural up right now for Pride on 3rd Street, Santa Monica, but I also have been doing a lot of cooking videos that bring together my Persian heritage and my lifetime of activism in the queer world.
Love that. And Jasmine?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine Seth. I am the chef and owner at Tasting India, and I'm based in Chicago. In addition to highlighting Indian regional cuisine and helping sort of break the stereotypes about what Indian food is and is not, I recently also launched my own line of spices that I call Spices Without Borders, to really showcase to folks that Indian spice blends are not just for chicken curries, but can be used across different cuisines as well.
Awesome. And then Zenat.
Jasmine, I'm going to need your spice blend now. My name is Zanette Begum. I'm the founder of Playground Coffee Shop, which is located in Brooklyn, New York. I'm also a good whistler, and I am now a DJ, I guess. So if you guys catch me on tour this summer, you know, maybe that's going to be my adjacent career to this all. But I'm really excited to be here alongside everybody on this panel today.
Thank you. I want to keep in mind that we're going to give a special thanks to the James Beard Foundation. They have an awesome mission statement. Their mission is to celebrate, support, and elevate the people behind America's food culture and champion a standard of good food anchored in talent, equity, and sustainability, which is definitely something all 5 of us are constantly trying to keep in our spaces and community. So specifically speaking about Pride, the queer community, LGBT plus community, what frustrates you about Pride? Let's start with the negatives, move into positives. Anyone can answer, go for it.
Okay, I'll say something.
You know,
as someone who started by having a queer clothing line in Brooklyn 15 years ago, and now seeing things, you know, evolving. I think the thing, if I wanted to be a little cranky, a little salty about it, is that there's always been queer and trans people who are makers and creators and designers and visionaries and thought leaders, and it's just kind of a little suspicious and annoying how nobody ever paid attention or supported any of the grassroots stuff that a lot of us did for a long time. And then suddenly, like in the last couple of years, because of rainbow capitalism, everybody is slapping a rainbow on their brand or their company and seeking out specifically people who identify as LGBTQ for very specific moments in time. But then the rest of the year, our work, our missions don't seem to really matter anymore.
Yeah, I definitely echo that too. I think another frustration personally for me has been just sort of the over commercialization of Pride and celebrating it. And almost feels like Pride, or the celebration of Pride, kind of stands for or means that, oh, it's just going to be a big party and you're there to drink and just party your face off. And I think, you know, so much of the true meaning of, you know, us as queer-owned businesses and what we stand for and the challenges that we fight against gets completely lost in that. And I think with like larger corporations, especially, like they have sort of the financial bandwidth to, you know, have sort of the soapbox that they can stand on and say, for the month of June, we believe in this, but then what about the rest of the year? So I think that's the frustrating part, is that it feels like it's a constant battle all the time to be heard and to be recognized for sort of all of the hurdles that we have come past and people before us have come past and paved the way for us.
I think that the hardest part about rainbow capitalism is, it just kind of feels like a mockery a lot of the time. Like you go to like the Capital One, you go to Chase Bank, you go to like all these major corporations, and it's just kind of this band. It's like, we did it, you guys, we eradicated, homophobia. It's like, no, because it's the same companies who like put forth this like rhetoric that like, for the month of June, we're prioritizing LGBTQ people, but then don't prioritize them within the company, like the structure, don't have higher ups that are LGBTQ or like, people of color or Black folk identifying. And I think that's the hardest part, is that like, we have to go along with this whole dance, because every day the queerest thing that anybody can do is be radical, right? Like that's what queerism is rooted in, is having to fight against this very large pressure, and also just like the idea of like, these people don't want queer people to exist. And overall, it feels like the fight is like, it's still continuing. Just because there's a rainbow on my bank doesn't mean that they love queer people. It just means that they're doing what they have to do to get all their bases covered. But really, it's just, at the end of the day, like, it's just something that like kind of goes backwards. And a lot of the time, like, we get lost when we like do brand associations with queer. But it's like, we need representation too. So it's like, where is it? Where is the middle? But I think just knowing that like every day being queer is something that like is the most radical thing I can do, or radical thing anybody can do, is where like I think my activism lies in, and not so much like this month of June where it's supposed to be, to your point, Jasmine, partying my face off, because we're all going to do that regardless, but like,
Yeah, I think to echo some of what Zenat just said, and also to preface that with that, I'm not fully like anti-rainbow capitalism. I think that it's a very like nuanced and complex system, but I will say that the over commodification of our culture, that's the problem. And allowing corporations and politics to kind of govern the way that we celebrate, and also just the way that we work within our own community. I think that's where the bigger problem is coming from, is because we also just get like caught up in all of that and kind of brainwashed into chasing that. Like as a specific example, I started my previous company, The Awkward Scone, by doing pop-ups and markets and fairs. And I had been invited to do the Pride Fest here in New York. And they kind of like cooed me with this idea that it was going to be so successful for me, and they wanted all these small LGBTQ plus owned businesses to showcase there. And I asked about some of the numbers and PARs, and they said that they were expecting over 500,000 people to walk through Pride Fest. And I was like, okay, that sounds insane and unbearable, but what are you telling your vendors to prepare for? And they said, well, normally we tell them to like prep to sell to 10,000 people. And even that, I was like, Jesus Christ, that is insane. I can't do that. And I will happily take 30% of that at a modest 3,000. So their numbers are 500,000 people coming through. I would be selling to 10,000. And I was like, I can maybe handle 3,000. And I flew my family in from New Mexico. I spent weeks and weeks prepping for this. And what they didn't tell you is that they tell their vendors like TD Bank to bring 10,000 free samples. It's a completely different market than what they were selling it to the small vendors for. I had another friend there that was doing popsicles that she made, like push pops, but they set her up across from TD, who was giving away free popsicles. I was next to Chipotle, who was like doing a wheel to spin for a free burrito. So their line was like blocking my booth the whole time. And so it wasn't that you were going to sell to 10,000 people, is that you should be prepared to give away stuff for 10,000 people. And if you're going to see it as a marketing opportunity, then that's a completely different story. But they misled me and other queer businesses to get us to be part of that representation for them. And when I reached out to them afterwards, I lost over $4,000 on that event, and it almost completely sank my business. And they didn't want to hear about it. They didn't care. They said that it was my fault. those are the numbers that they use. But I think that through this over commodification of our culture, we're losing handle of our own community. And I think that that's the biggest frustration for me.
I think it's really important that you said that at the end, because there's a huge theme that you guys said of like just like corporate label washing. And they take Pride Month and they make it work for them and not look at the community that they're trying to represent and uplift and ask, how can we help you? And they don't ask those questions, because if they would have asked you, Eric, that question, then you would have been able to say like, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I need, instead of the other way around.
Yeah, that's where hard work actually begins, is because are you creating the systems for your queer businesses and small businesses to thrive in?
Right.
Like to Eric's point, like they were set up to fail from the get-go. And, I feel like this over sort of commercialization and always looking at like the bigger brands who have the financial backing and the ability to sustain a loss like this just shows that you have complete lack of empathy, knowledge, consideration, and sensitivity towards the struggles that small businesses have to get off the ground and sustain themselves on a daily basis.
And to further that, I did actually try to continue the conversation for their future events and said, it's important that we're there, businesses like mine. And if you're gonna continue to invite us, these are some of the steps that you should take to protect us. Put us in our own area where you charge a certain fee to get in and people know they're buying it, where you're paying the vendors a certain amount to represent it, something. But I wanted to open up a dialogue with them about how to continue to protect queer businesses at a queer event run by queer people. But they were too far gone to want to hear any of that.
I think that's really disappointing to hear, especially because a lot of these big brands and businesses are doing a lot of like, even just with their merchandise, they're doing a lot of like rainbow merchandise, and they'll do like, I even saw a couple of brands that are like they color wash their whatever brand they normally have, and they give like a special Pride logo and things like that, and they donate it to a large nonprofit. But what they don't realize is that nonprofit, they get all that money for 1 month, and then they're expected to stretch it for 11 more months. And even for small businesses, we get all this money for June, but also it's even like, it kind of even bounces out sometimes because it's such a big rush. So then you're having more product, you're having more labor, and things like that. And so you're expected to stretch that for 11 months and hope that you get more traction and things. But on the other side, we are celebrating. This is a month for us to like be excited and to like have these panels and meet each other and find like other corners of the world of people that are just like us. So I wanted to ask you guys, how do you celebrate your pride in your own spaces and communities?
I think it's about setting intention, because this last year was really difficult for so many people. I'm sure it's been even getting over it, and I think processing it this year is even kind of more eye-opening, But I think that, when we were doing all of these pivots in our business, and I felt like there was no option, and I thought that there was going to be no safety net for any of these small businesses that were closing down. And I see this month and everybody's like, oh, let's support queer-owned businesses. And then for like just all these, like the AAPI stuff that was happening, and also just like centering, it just kind of feels like this opportunity has come as a result of the race war popping off, as a result of systematic racism playing itself out during a global pandemic that affects people who are marginalized and vulnerable communities who can't like speak up for themselves. It's like, what is all that for, right? It's like, at the end of the day, it's still merch. They're putting it in a store that they have to push, and they're going to get money from this, right? They're going to look great at the end of this. Like, we did an event with ASOP when we set up a queer library with them. So they have them in 3 major cities. So they have one in Toronto, LA, and in New York. They took off the products off their shelves to then put up a queer library that is available for a whole week, and it's all free. That's what I'm talking about. Not the idea of like, we're not pushing anything, we're not going to make anything. we're going to actually just distribute radical ideas and radical texts and get people all the things that they need. You know, and there's so many times where I kind of felt like this was hopeless. You know, I'm like, how am I going to get all these companies that want to work with Playground right now? Because it's Pride Month, that it's important to work and also work towards initiatives. And, you know, as much as I want to be like, let's do a campaign with my face on it and I'll wear a rainbow flag shirt, I don't want to. You know, and I think that's what we have to start understanding is that, like, they're going to use our likeness, they're going to use our faces, they're going to use our skin colors, our stories to tell their story, you know. And there is absolutely no like guidance for any of this kind of stuff, because also as there is more visibility for queer owned brands now, there is, you know, people can't meet their demands. Like I'm realizing that a lot of my favorite restaurants are queer owned, Black owned, like brown owned, have lines out the door, and we're realizing that we can't actually withstand this traffic. But it's because we've never had success like this. We've never been told that this is actually what was going to happen. And in the first 5 years of me owning Playground, we're making our 5-year anniversary on 31st. I'm realizing that like a lot of it was just me like hustling. A lot of it was me just going with the flow. And like Eric, when I used to buy kolaches from you, you know, I was like, this is it. I'm already working with so many businesses and we're going to do this together. And it was just like so hard. You know, I didn't even know if I was going to have enough money to pay sometimes Eric for his kolaches. And I was like, it's going to work out. It's fine. And every day I was like, it's going to work out. It's fine. And after 5 years of also going through a pandemic, I think I'm for the first time realizing it's going to be okay, because I've made it my problem and also my priority to make sure Playground and the world that Playground has created exists. And I've been so persistent about, you know, and of course now it's going to be a whole story about like, so it's been 5 years, how's it been? And it kind of just feels like a blink of an eye, you know? But at the same time, I know that I'm very thankful to be able to be on a panel like this, and also just like to hear so many stories of people like knowing that it's so hard, but you still are like, you're just kind of like the hero of your own story, you know? And I think that like every time I look at other people who are in different cities, like you being in LA and you being in Chicago, it's like, we're all like bound by this inextricable link to also like bring sovereignty within the food industry, because we know that how hard it is to get into it, but also we know who can afford to eat from these institutions, period. So to answer your question, I'm not really sure if I kind of went on a weird tangent, but yeah.
Zenat and Vanessa, I want to piggyback on what you're talking about. For me, I think the way that celebrating Pride as a person in food who is trying to also maintain some level of social impact is through mutual aid. Here in LA, what's been happening a lot, which I feel so good about, is that a lot of the collaborations, work, projects that have been coming my way are from other queer and BIPOC brands, nonprofits, individuals who want to support each other. And so I'm not, you know, like, so it's, for example, I just did this thing with, are you all familiar with Project Q here in LA? It's a queer Black founded nonprofit that does a lot of services for LGBTQ youth at risk who are almost homeless. And for me, it was a huge like honor that they reached out to me, and together we developed recipes, and I was able to illustrate the recipes for these food boxes that are given to like 16 to 23-year-old LGBTQ kids who are almost homeless, and to help them learn and be inspired to cook simple foods out of a pot on a hot plate, you know, because that's all they have access to. Getting those kind of, and it's Pride related. This was a Pride related project. So getting those mutual aid projects where like all us LGBTQ, Black and brown and immigrant people can find ways to work together, support each other, it kind of helps make the rainbow capitalism feel a little better, you know, because it's we're all helping each other out and supporting each other's work.
And also within mutual aid, like I realized this year, like the $20 that I'd Venmo for my friend who had like a flat tire on his bike is the same $20 that he's going to give to another nonprofit. Is it the same $20 that's like we keep rotating? And that's important, is because mutually we are understanding that like we can kind of keep each other alive in a way that's like, it's just like reciprocal, you know? So yeah, of course, mutual aid is also an understanding that like there isn't any hierarchies, is that like we help each other just because, you know? obviously within your bounds as well.
So, go ahead, Eric.
Oh, I was just gonna piggyback even more off of that about celebrating. I think there's like the easy like low-hanging fruit of like actually having a celebration. We had a very queer brunch at my restaurant this past Sunday where we hired DJs, and we did not offer our menu, and I invited 2 other queer chefs to collaborate, and I made it very clear all over social media that this was about celebrating us and that they were not gonna be able to get my menu and that they couldn't bring any bad energy in getting upset at us. So I think there's stuff like that, but I think the other parts of it are celebrating us through inclusivity and diversity with your staff. And I have like 90% of my staff is queer. And who else, how you're reinvesting in your own community. We're all existing in capitalism, but how are we using it to like bring each other up, and who are you bringing up with you? We've been doing since February, like a queer pop-up series in my space where we invite other queer chefs to come exhibit their food and whatever they're doing to help their businesses. And it doesn't cost them anything. I'm physically there to give my labor and my time. And I think that that's a way to celebrate year round, is to continuously, just like through this mutual aid, through this $20 that just keeps passing around, we're taking the money and we're reinvesting it in the community. And I think that's the best thing that we can do to celebrate.
Yeah, I really agree, like working to create the spaces where queer businesses can continue to thrive without having to worry about the lack of financial ability to do so.
I think that's really important. I wanted to make a notation for those that are viewing that if you have questions, we will have a moment to do a Q&A. If you want to ask your questions now, we can get them in the queue. That way they don't get passed up. Just to make sure that you get your question, and if you want to direct it to the whole audience, to the whole panel, or to a specific person, let us know. I think Eric, you made a really good point, and you also made a really good point about with all of you guys saying with mutual aid, and then this is, like you said, Eric, it's a 365 type of situation. Like this is how we can celebrate each other. This is how we can lift each other up and support our businesses by we're running queer businesses, we're hiring queer people, we're engaging with other queer businesses together. So even when June is over, it's still a cyclical thing that's happening every single day, So what are some things, this is kind of like maybe like a 2-ish part question. So with the 365 in mind, what does inclusivity look like for you guys if if a company were to come to you and say, we want to be more inclusive, we want to really level up what pride means year round? What does that look like for you guys?
That is hiring queer people, that is making sure they get good paying jobs, healthcare. I'm talking all benefits. You can talk the talk, but you have to walk the walk. You know what I'm saying? I think it has to be actionable responses. And I think in a time right now where there's so much legislation being passed that are anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ, we have to be on board with those things too. And I'm not saying that it's not a queer person's responsibility to advocate for every queer person possible, but I feel like if you have a platform, use it, And I think that's what it is about. It's like when last year in March, after we got the notice of the shutdown, I was so scared because I didn't know what was going to happen to my business. And then in June, we started to protest, and we immediately hit the streets. We were doing PPE kits. Like we did, I think 20,000 PPE kits in the time frame of like 60 days. And we were going to protest every day, 3 of them with 10 volunteers each, on bike, on foot, on wheels, And I'm using my space. I'm using this restaurant that I was once profiting off of to now help people to make sure they're protesting safely. You're saying that there's, an influx of people getting COVID through protesting. Cool. We're going to make sure everybody has a mask. And then we started the community fridges, which is kind of the most wildest thing that's ever happened to me. We started our fridge, and then it just happened everywhere in the world. Like somebody hit me up from Fiji and was like, hey, we're setting up a fridge here, and I didn't stop going. And then from then I realized I need to start working with food distributors. And then we started working with queer food distributors, using our network to become larger and larger every day, like using our own resources, you know? And I was like so adamant. I knew that it was so scary to kind of go out and also put myself in a vulnerable place to also contract COVID, but I was trying to be so safe and making sure families were getting fed. My neighbors had, you know, food to feed for their kids. And we put up all these fridges, and then we started a greenhouse. You know, it's just like thinking about all the ways that we can take control over these ways that we've been oppressed is so important. You know, now we're trying to advocate for having land within our shop, and now we're doing construction, so we're going to have more space. You know, and we're thinking about the ways that like we'll be able to hire more people. But like, you know, of course, as we want to be advocates for queer safety, we also have to create queer safe spaces. And I've learned that through being in so many and feeling so unsafe myself, that I've had to make, and if not actually pave the way for creating my own. And that comes with a lot of territory because it's a lot of trial and error. But I think it's the persistent that we all have. You know, with Eric, I feel so similar to you, where like whenever we do a pop-up, I'm like, I will give you all my labor, I'll give you my car, I'll pick up everything, I'll pay for all the Ubers, because I just want people to know that like they're totally believed in. And I wish that's something that I had when I started this business when I was 22 years old, was someone being like, hey, you got this, kid, you know, keep going. But I never heard that. And I think I was always waiting for that, even if it meant nothing, you know. And I think we need to also like make sure that we're having opportunities with kids to like know that they don't have to become a doctor. You can also become a chef. You can also become a community space, like, you know, founder. You can also, you know, be a director for an amazing, like just like so many editorial magazines and all that kind of stuff. And I think that our boundaries, there should be no boundaries within having this queer identity be focused on a body. You know, there's so much more than that. And this ideology is something that I really want to start, you know, saying out more to myself, because it's like, I do realize that sometimes I'm so scared to take up space that then I deny myself the experience of being who I am. So I'm just realizing that I have to relinquish, what is the phrase? Relinquishing control to gain power, or something, relinquishing power to gain control, you know, and like giving it up to the people who've done so much for me and I've done so much for them, and knowing that this cyclical love that we have for each other is ultimately going to manifest in ways that are fruitful for all of us.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's so important to like continuously create opportunities for mentorship, make sure that you're, you know, hiring more queer people. I'm so proud to say that my business is 75% queer, which is amazing to me. And I think it brings such a fresh and interesting perspective, and just varied backgrounds and interests. And I think it provides so much value to businesses as well, that I think if as a business you're not engaging in those practices, you're really losing out on a lot of valuable stuff.
Yeah, I kind of want to piggyback off of that for a moment of hiring. You know, I think that's really an important thing to consider. Um, Even right now at my current position, the wages that they previously presented were not great, and I was like, I'm not going to let anyone come work here with these wages, because I'm in a position of power where I need to support those that are looking for sustainable wage, that are looking for health benefits, that are looking for to not work 3 jobs in Los Angeles. And I'm not going to be a part of that problem. And so before I even like called people to interview, I was like, we need to raise these wages before I even employ anybody for this company. So I think it also expands past small business. It's also like if you're in positions in corporate America, you also need to fight as well for who you're hiring and who you're allowed to hire, who's being hired around you, because that's also a big part of rainbow capitalism, is making sure that everyone's getting hired in all the spaces, everyone's getting all the opportunities. Um, I started Tasty Tutelage last year during all the protesting, because I uh, felt kind of helpless, and like I really want to contribute in a way that doesn't just involve being on the streets protesting. And so that's when we did the mutual aid fund of people basically sending money in. And we were sending groceries via Instacart across the country to people that had food insecurity. And then every other day, I was going live on Zoom teaching classes on how to use the groceries we sent them. So it's making sure people are fed and also knowing how they can feed themselves. It's a cyclical motion that happens year round. My last kind of big question for you guys is, now that we've talked about like what, rainbow capitalism looks like, the positives and the negatives, we've talked about, what we're doing as individuals. And of course, I want you guys to expound on that if you didn't get a chance to. But now that we are taking this past June, we're hiring, we're engaging. What do you think is the next thing that we should be looking forward to? I think especially there's a lot of younger people that are looking at us. There's a lot of new people in general that are just now coming out. And so Pride is really exciting for them. This is their very first month of Pride. But obviously every year we want it to look better. We want it to be represented better. What does that look like?
I kind of want to make a quick note. Our conversation hasn't been too negative about rainbow capitalism, but I feel like in my sphere, I hear a lot of conversation negating rainbow capitalism and not wanting it to exist at all. And I just want to make sure that through this conversation, we're also just taking note of the advantage that we all have in big cities of having access to conversation and more progressiveness, and just making sure that we're not acting as the gatekeepers for what rainbow capitalism means to some people in smaller towns who don't have this access, because that shirt at Target or even that flag at Capital One could mean a lot to that person in that small town. And I'm not saying that like corporations are the saviors of our queer youth, but it could be like a matter of life or death for a young queer in a small town, that's their one moment of pride. And there are a lot of studies that show that the suicide rates among queer youth is exponentially lowered by just having like one adult who supports a queer lifestyle in their perimeter. So I think it's important that we like continue to support the idea of visibility even through corporations, but holding them accountable and then asking throughout the year what they're doing to make through with their promise of what they did in June. And that's like creating diversity and inclusivity within their staff and hiring. And if their health insurance plans are covering trans people, if it's an app or something, are you able to change your name on there so that a trans person can change their name and doesn't have to keep reusing their dead name when they log in? Are they creating stuff that is size or gender inclusive? Like, these are the questions that I think we ask the corporations to continue thinking about throughout the year to show that they're legitimately here to support our community.
And Eric, I'd love to say something in addition to everything you're saying. You made such a great point. And for a lot of us who probably did grow up in those small towns, like I grew up in Arizona, close to New Mexico. And the thing I want to say is, I think the other thing we need to hold corporations accountable for is when it's time, when they're making their plans for their Pride merchandise or whatever it is that they're going to do, ask themselves, is there someone from the queer, trans, LGBTQ world we could hire to design that t-shirt that we're going to put in our store? Like, let's, at least if you're going to do this stuff, hire people who are from that community to do the work. You know what I mean? That's the one thing that I think is great. Like, let's have every major retailer put out those t-shirts and food and whatever, but ask yourself, who are you hiring to make that? Who are the creatives who are you're having come to? That would make things a lot better, I think.
I think it's a great point, Parisa, because you can tell, like, when someone not in the community has spearheaded a campaign. And it also happens, like, during Black History Month and like Native American History Month, things like that. You can tell, like, no one brown took this, like no one brown like checked this off. Like, this is not something like so it's meaningful, especially like what Eric was saying. Like, I'm from a small town, North Carolina. And I don't know if you guys know about the South, but So having those little trinkets and things at Target that's accessible, even if they can even buy it, the fact that they can walk past the store and see something that they can look forward to is super meaningful. I even remember just going around in high school and even just saying the words like, "Oh, my girlfriend." Other people would be like, "What?" Like, like just knowing that there's someone around them like them is super important. And as adults, like here in Los Angeles, like we have Los Angeles LGBT Center, and we have a huge mentorship program. And there are kids, I think, from ages 11 to 22 that they ask them, "Hey, we would like to get a mentor." And so I encourage you, anyone, wherever you are, if there is a mentorship program in your area, to reach out and spend some time with these kids, spend some time with the people in your community, because we're all here for each other. We're all we've got. So it's really important to separate outside of ourselves sometimes and really look at like what else the community needs besides what we are currently offering.
Well, and who are they catering to? Like, who's actually going to wear this if you're making this for your stores, and where is that money going? I think I lived in LA for a little while. Like, some of my coming of age queer story, I moved to LA to come out of the closet. I dropped out of college and I moved there. And I remember my first time walking down Santa Monica was just like so eye-opening to me, because there were rainbow flags everywhere and it was December. And then here in New York, you see that, and like what kind of still exists of the neighborhoods here, but that's either a queer-owned business or it's Pride. Those rainbow flags come down after that. And so you got to talk about, like, are you actually investing in this community, or is this all just a smoke show and lip service? Because that's the difference. And I think that making sure that their profits are going towards these organizations, and also which organizations are they going to? Are they going to HRC? Where's that money going? Or are they going to like smaller grassroots and independent organizations who are actually putting the money out into the community?
I think that's a good point. I wanted to ask you guys about, since we're kind of wrapping up the month, is there any fear about being typecasted? Because I know, like, I get really busy in May for Mental Health Awareness Month. I get really busy in June for Pride. I get busy in February for Black History Month, and I get busy in November for Native American Heritage Month. But then every other month, it's just like crickets as far as like brand support, as far as articles, as far as donations. So do you guys have a fear of like moving forward, like you're just gonna get stuck into this typecast of this is all your business is, this is all that you guys can offer in these moments of time, or even not even just moments of time, but like this big flashing sign that's like queer owned, like how are you guys feeling about that?
I mean, I'm not ashamed of that. So I'm happy for them to continue putting that label on it. And I'm happy that it gives us the visibility. But yes, I do want people to know that there's more to that. Like, we're creating good food also. And that's important. I'm a chef who happens to be queer, not the queer chef. So I think that making that distinction is very important. I'm happy to have queer owned all over everything, but that's not all we offer.
Absolutely.
I've oh, sorry.
I
thought this has actually been something that's been I've thought a lot about, especially during my own pivot during the pandemic. Because again, like I mentioned, first I had a queer clothing line, then I got known in LA for my Persian suppers and salon pop-ups, but that really catered a lot to the LGBTQ world. I do feel like I've gotten typecast a lot, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, because in one way it means I get like cool video and TV gigs because of that. Like, oh, she's the queer Iranian in LA. Let's have her do something, which I'm very grateful for all of you who have, sponsored me. Thank you. But what I've done, which this spice blend that I've created, Persican, I'm trying to take the concept of us being these intersectional people, that word we use a lot, right? And I'm trying to figure out how to like pull myself out where I'm not only being seen as the queer Persian chick, And so like for me, I haven't even had a chance yet to really create the platform, but I want to start talking about this concept of cultural and culinary fluidity, and how a lot of us are a mix of not only our ethnic or our cultural heritages, but our lived experience as queer and trans bodies, along with what town we grew up in, along with all our travels. All of that creates these identities in us that are so layered, and my spice blends are layered. And so the way I'm trying to pull myself out of just being typecast as the queer fill in the blank is by trying to expand the concept and be like, we're layered people. All of us are layered people. Let's start talking about all of our juicy layers and how that makes each of us unique and special and to be celebrated.
Yeah, for me personally, I would love to be more known as being queer and for being queer, because it's a huge part of my identity. It's a huge part of how I choose to move through this world. And really funnily, like being, Indian, I always on a daily basis face assumptions and stereotypes about what an Indian girl should be, cannot have short hair, cannot be queer. And so, yeah, typecast me as queer. So then people will know loud and clear that, yeah, even, it doesn't matter what sort of cultural background you come from, you can still be queer and you can stand for, all of the things that being queer stands for, is like swimming against the tide and constantly challenging the patriarchy and, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm happy to be typecast as that.
What I think is great though, that obviously there's like no shame. Like, of course we want people to know that we're queer owned, that we're minority owned, because that also tells you that we're safe spaces, that this is a place you can go to and you can be yourself here. So having that moniker on our businesses and our brands are super important. But I think the big question that I get asked a lot, and I want to know your input, is like, people ask like, what is queer food? And I'm like, I don't like, I don't know. I make it. I'm queer, queer food. Like, like there it is. But have you guys had a moment to channel for yourself like what queer food is to you? Like, do you feel like it's a cultural thing for you? Do you feel like it's a community thing?
This goes back to what was just said by Parisa, and talking about layers. And I think that from a very superficial perspective of what you're looking at for this spice blend, if you don't have that like connection to the community, you're going to miss out on all of the richness that's in there. But if you take a moment to like actually indulge yourself and get to know the maker or the food, you're going to unlock like all of those secrets to what that art is. And even at Ursula, all of the food is tied to some kind of sensory memory of mine from the past, whether it's like family recipes, things I grew up with, or just moments in my life that changed the perspective or the way that I was moving through food. We have a bunch of blended herbal teas that I blended there. And that was all a reflection of a time in my life where I was like struggling with alcoholism and liver damage and trying to find a different way to like calm myself or have a vice at night, but still having that culinary connection. And although I don't have to deal with that now, that was a piece of my life. And that is attached to my queerness too. We had a really wonderful chef doing a pop-up last week who happens to be trans. And I imagine that their food too is a reflection of them moving through the kitchen through their transition too, and how it went from being hyper masculine to being in touch with their femininity. And that's all kind of reflected in the way that food is plated and served. And you have to be the one to like receive all that information. If you're not ready for it, then it's not for you.
Right. Absolutely. I think it's just about storytelling, at the end of the day, the ways we choose to label ourselves, and through struggle, it's important to know that like queer food is something that we've used for survival. And for me, I think it's really important to say that out loud, because a lot of the times, even within my friends that I've collaborated with, the moments that we were able to come together and create this like bountiful feast, through whether it's done through our community dinners that we've done in the past, or even just like a lunch for just people who like work at the shop. It's how we gather, and it's the moment that we have. Like, I don't even get to eat as a person who owns a restaurant sometimes for, until like the end of the day, weeks, I know. But when we do have this moment and when we talk about food and having queer food, like it's our solace, you know, and I think it's something that I look forward to, and it's made me and shaped my entire existence. So
I think I want to talk to you guys. So Queer Food Foundation, I mean, that's kind of our purpose is, you know, uplifting, supporting queer folks, chefs, food enthusiasts, people, everyone, because everyone eats. And so we're really going to start launching a program called Queer All Year. And it's basically exactly what we're talking about. We're going to be working on having conversations like this, challenging consumers, challenging businesses, small and large, bringing people together, and especially because we're kind of phasing into post quarantine, you know, having those connections in person again, and bringing people from East Coast, West Coast, you know, back together to break bread and to celebrate, and just like Eric's brunch and things, like doing more of those things all year round, because I think that's really important that we get an opportunity to celebrate ourselves not just in June, but as much as possible. We get a chance to have as many safe spaces, and we get a chance to meet as many people as possible, especially as business owners as ourselves and things. Um, we are outreaching literally every single day, even if we're not touching their hand physically, online through panels like this. This is a year-round operation. So we did get a question about how people and consumers can support the LGBTQIA plus community year round, and how do they find queer spaces?
I mean, I would think finding queer spaces, I think these days it's great just through social media. Like so many of us are out letting everyone know that there's, you know, you have restaurants, you have pop-ups, you have products that you're creating. And that's a really great way to support folks is think about them not just during Pride to buy from them or go to their restaurant or I don't know, go to their event, but all year round, be like, oh, you know, I don't have to just be an ally or hang out with queer people in June. I could like go to that queer chef's restaurant in September and try out that food, you know, just something simple like that.
Yeah, they out here you see a lot of the food media where they're like, here's 10 Black-owned businesses to support during Black History Month. And it's like, that's great that you're giving them this platform, but how about here's 10 Black-owned businesses to support in July? And that same kind of thing, like give them the platform all year long. It doesn't have to just be 1 month. And also like in your workspace, in your community, ask your own bosses, your own community, like what they're doing to continue to support the queer community rather than just kind of, I guess, stepping back from it after June is over. Like it's up to us to keep these companies accountable year round and keep that conversation moving.
I want to thank all of you guys for all of your insight. Everyone has such different perspectives, which I love. I do want to notate that like the Queer Food Foundation, we are starting a database for queer private chefs, queer restaurants, things of that sort, queer DJs, you know, that way companies, if you guys are looking to hire someone, you can reach out to us and we kind of vet to make sure that people are getting paid. So we're kind of acting as if though that third party to make sure that we honor everyone's time, because this is a lot of time being in the kitchen, being chefs, being business owners. Like there is a lot of labor involved. There's also a lot of love involved too. So we want to make sure that that gets circulated around and that, people aren't just getting treated like workhorses. I feel there's a lot of exploitation enough, that we shouldn't be doing it amongst ourselves in our community. So I want to thank you guys all, Eric, Parisa, Zenat, Jasmine, James Beard Foundation. Thank you guys so much for your time. Thank you to everyone that attended the panel. Of course, everyone that attended the panel will be getting a virtual goodie bag. It's going to have discounts to different products and different classes and things like that from some of the panelists and other favorite queer folks in the food world. So look out for that email for you guys to get that virtual goodie bag. And we will see you guys in the ether and in person. Thank you so much. I'm going to bring it over to, I think we have one more thing from Morgan, if you guys are still here.
Yes, definitely. I also just wanted to say thank you guys so much for being on this panel, for this wonderful open conversation. I easily could have gone like an hour longer listening to all of this. So thank you guys so much for taking the time. Thank you, Vanessa, for moderating tonight. Thank you to the Queer Food Foundation for working with us. And like you said, we will be sending out a virtual goodie bag to each of our attendees, so just keep an eye on your emails tomorrow. If you enjoyed tonight's conversation, feel free to go to jamesbeard.org to check out other upcoming virtual events. Check out Queer Food Foundation at queerfoodfoundation.org, and support Black and Indigenous American business owners by donating to jamesbeard.org/prevent-fund. Thank you guys so much once again. Have a great night and happy Pride.